Hey, my friends, it's Mary Rose here. I'm so glad to see you through my magic screen. Thanks so much for coming to this live. It's sort of my first adventure doing a kind of a live broadcast to both Facebook and YouTube at the same time. So if you are here, and I think some of you are, I would love it if you just left me a comment and so that I know that you're here and where you're watching. That would just be awesome. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. And if you don't know me, let me just take a minute to introduce myself while those comments come in. I'm Mary Rose Wood. I'm an author. I've written a lot of different kinds of things, but I'm probably best known for my middle grade fiction, which includes a series of books called The Incorrigible Children of Ashton Place, which were published by HarperCollins. And my most recent book came out in September from Macmillan, and it's called Alice's Farm, A Rabbit's Tale. But I came to fiction writing, in my 40s. Let's not beat around the bush. And I often, am approached by writers who are like, it's too late. It's too late for me to get started with my career. It's like, it's never too late. I'm a writer doing other forms for screenwriting, playwriting, all kinds of things. But I didn't actually start to write fiction until I was in my 40s. I'd started out as an actor. I studied improv. I was just kind of at play in the field of creative storytelling in many different ways for decades. And then, it all kind of came together. And when it did, I was ready to learn. I knew that I was old enough and wise enough to know that I shouldn't just, shoot from the hip, that if I wanted to play in the big leagues, I was going to need to study and figure it out. And so I did. And so 14 published books later, it is really so important to me to be able to connect with people who want to do the same, who love to write, who love stories, who love to be part of the publishing community, the writing community, and that they want to do it right. They want to level up. So I'm very pleased to see now some of my fabulous students are here. Some folks I don't know. Hey, May from Montana. Hey, Terry, watching on YouTube. That's exciting. I have a greeting from Diamond Bar. And another Facebook user. No, if it's okay. I don't need to know who you are, but just so you know, if you're on Facebook, you have to give StreamYard permission to tell me who you are. There's a little link to do that. So we'll sort that out for next time because I'm going to do these lives every week. So if you just came out of NaNoWriMo, you're still like going like this, like phew, phew. It was, and if you don't know what NaNoWriMo was, every November, so many people around the world, I think it's like 500,000, commit to like writing every day, getting a draft done of some work they feel passionate about, and they're going to just try to crank out. I think the crazy goal is something like 50,000 words in a month. Well, that is kind of a crazy goal. But listen, commitment is huge. Like the commitment gets us across the line from inaction to action. And if you want to make things happen in your life, you know that you have to do that. And so one of the things that's been going on in November is that I started to throw out a daily writing tip. Woo! And I made it like literally almost every day, not every single day. There were days that I had to bake pies. I have responsibilities too, just like everybody else. But I did make it almost every day. And people are starting to send in questions. So now November's done. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to pivot to once a week getting on with you guys, doing live, answering your questions and seeing how we can kind of push you forward and give you actionable tips, things that you can really do that are going to make a difference in your writing or significantly in the way you think about your writing, because there's writing craft, there's story structure, but then there's also like sort of taking care of where the magic happens. Writing is a very personal endeavor. And so much of what we have to deal with as writers is not just studying the craft, not just getting our story structure chops, tuned up, but dealing with the ambivalence, the reluctance to write, the procrastination, the self-judgment, the sort of the questions that come up, like why is it so hard, or why does it start out so easy and then get so hard after I've written like 10 or 20 pages? I have these great ideas, I dive in, but then, it's just hard to keep it going. And one of the things that people do is we want a reason, right? even if the reason is a self-criticism. So it's hard because I'm not talented. It's hard because I don't have discipline. It's hard because I have nothing to say. Like we come up with these reasons why writing is hard. And I'm here to tell you, yeah, writing is hard, but it's not for those reasons that it's hard. It's because we have ideas wherever we got them from that are just not necessarily true. We feel that we should be able to write because we love to read, right? We've read a ton of books. We love stories. We're steeped in them, and we feel that should be enough, but if you love music and you sit around listening to, the greatest recordings of, musicians, classical pianists, or, opera singers or great jazz musicians, and you listen and you listen and listen, and I hand you a saxophone or I put you at the piano bench, it doesn't mean you know how to play, right? There is a gap between the desire to have mastery in something and the actual mastery. And that gap is filled by training and practice and the willingness to live with the discomfort of knowing that what you're doing is not as good as the work that inspired you to want to be a writer in the first place. So I got a terrific question that kind of falls a little bit into this category of self-judgments or, opinions that we have about our own writing that hold us back, that are actually just not based on any kind of real, character flaw or deficiency, that are based more in like it's a mistaken idea about what it's like to write. And so the question is this. Let me see if I can get it up. So it's our topic, why are my ideas to feel like they've all been done before? This is the question that came in from one of my readers who was getting my tips. He sent me a really great email about it, a really personal email about it, and I really appreciated the vulnerability, because I think writing does make us feel vulnerable. Why are I get these great ideas and I sit down to work with them, and then I realize they just feel like they've been done before. And so where's the error in thinking there is that means that you should abandon the project, that one should abandon the project. It's not worth writing because it's been done before. So what does it mean to seek originality, in our writing? What does it mean? And I would love for you guys who are, able to comment if this question of originality has ever come to haunt you in your dreams. If that is something that's ever come up for you, I would just like to know how common a problem this is, because I think it does come up for people, especially when you're an avid reader, right? Because you've read so much, and so like everything that you sit down to write, I'm just borrowing from stuff I read. I didn't think of that. So here's my answer to this question of, is originality really a thing? All stories are about change. Literally all stories are about change, which is a way of saying that all stories are sort of by definition about the same thing, right? And when I say they're about change, I just want you to think for a minute about what that means, because if you think of a story that you love, it starts in a certain circumstance, right? There's almost always a main character who's in some sort of circumstance. And by the end of the story, a lot has changed, So they've gone on some sort of adventure. They've had some kind of huge challenge thrown at them. They've had a mystery to solve. They've fallen in love. Whatever has, like, something has changed in their world. They volunteered as tribute, right? They did stuff that changed, not only their own circumstance, but usually the circumstances of others around them and the people in their world. And so when you think about that, just like that very core idea, if all stories are about change, then they're all about the same thing. And let's take it to the next question, like sort of next logical unpeeling of the onion. How does change happen in your life or in the life of people that you know? How does change take place? What makes it happen? What sets it in motion? And if you want to, leave answers in the comments, I'd love to see them. I know that in my experience, and I think in the experience of most human beings, if circumstances are uncomfortable, then change happens. If everything is fine, if everything is hunky-dory, if we are living our best life, and I kind of hope you all are, if we're living our best life, change is the last thing we want, right? If we're living our best life, all of our energy is like trying to hold it still, trying to keep what we have, trying to prevent change from taking away from us. Our whole, we get this very conservative impulse, like, I got it, I made it, now I got to hang on to it, right? So the truth is that life very rarely feels like that. Life, we often have a vision of our best life, but we usually feel like we're in the midst of creating it, right? We're on our way to it. We're trying to make it happen in some areas of our life or other. So the change comes essentially from there's some dissatisfaction. There's some difficulty, something that is unsustainable. And the truth is that in our lives, we have a level of discomfort that we are able to live with. But you know what happens? What eventually does hit the fan, right? There are moments in our lives when something enormous happens that just like knocks over the house of cards. This isn't going to work anymore. And these, we tend to think of them as like often the tragedies, but they can be joyful things too. Young people leaving home for the first time is like a coming of age adventure. It's stressful and it's difficult, and has all kinds of resistance comes up, but it's a positive and necessary adventure. But we lose people we love, or relationships end, or nowadays illness can happen. Like, things happen in people's lives that knock over the system that they've built and force them to build a new system. The moments when change is non-negotiable. You have to change. You're not being given a choice, right? So now we know something else, right? If all stories are about change, and change happens when our situation becomes unsustainable, right? Or when discomfort reaches a tipping point, then that's two things already that all stories have in common. How's the other thing about change? Now, do people change all at once? You snap your fingers, you go to the gym, you're like, I'm going to change from the unfit person that I am to the super, buff, ripped person that I am in my dreams. I'm going to go to the gym once and it's going to happen. I'm just going to go once. I'm going to have like a little light workout and I'm going to be transformed. Oh, if only it were that easy, right? It's not how it happens. We have to go again and again. We have to go again and again. We have to work outside our comfort zone. When we level up a little bit, guess what we have to do then? If we want to keep the change going, we have to make the task harder. We escalate the difficulty. All right. Guess what that's called? Story structure, right? We have a hero who needs to change because their world has become unsustainable. In order for that change to happen, there has to be a kind of escalating series of difficulties that continually push them out of their comfort zone. And when they get a new comfort zone, they're going to get pushed out of it again. All right. Interesting. Do we do this alone? No, we don't do it alone. In life, we don't do it alone. We have friends, we have allies, we have loved ones who support us and help us. We also have people who are very, very attached to the way we used to be, right? We have people that are like, no, don't change. You're perfect the way you are. And, sometimes you're being loving. That's great. But if we're ready for a change, that's not always the best advice. We've reached a point that we're not ready to settle for the way things have been. But people around us may feel differently. So those people may try to hold us back. So on the one hand, we have people who help move us forward. We have people who push us back. Circumstances may push us back. So this landscape of change is populated by forces that help and forces that stand in the way. That's something else that all stories have in common, And so do you see where I'm driving here? The shape of story, Like the actual structure of story is like it's like the Fibonacci sequence. You know what I mean? If you guys give me my mathematicians, people who know the Fibonacci sequence, it's that mathematical formula that is this like recurring spiral that we find over and over and over and over again in nature, in the whirl of a seashell, in the arrangement on the inside of a flower. You know, it it seems to be part of the natural order. You know, there's mystery involved, which is, I think, terrific. Story has that quality that stories have this kind of commonality, you know, this sort of shared DNA that makes a great story feel like a story to the human reader. If those of you who are familiar with the great mythologist and scholar Joseph Campbell know that this is very much part of what he wrote about, and his work has become the foundation for what is called the hero's journey, which many writers, you know, have come into contact with. A lot of people have talked about it, but he was talking about this amazing Fibonacci sequence, right? This sort of consistent structure within story. He described it as the hero's journey and wrote a great deal about it. And the reason that I mentioned Joseph Campbell is that one of the things that he made clear is that's common quality in stories is not a product of any single culture. It's not like there were three writers who came up with it and, you know, and the rest of us are copying them. It just has been seeping through, you know, through the earth and into human consciousness since the beginning of storytelling, you know, long before writing anything down. Were just painted on the walls of caves. You sort of see elements of this very, very consistently throughout. I am a believer, they believe differently, but I'm very much a believer that story is like a key part of what makes us human. And it's one of the things that we all have in common. And I love when we have things in common, because this is lead to trouble. And we have to work hard to remember how much we have in common, so much more than the things that separate us. That's why I think storytelling is a path. It is a very noble and important calling. So back to the idea of originality. If all stories share kind of shape, don't you think that there's going to come a time when you're working on your story and you're going to be like, well, it's so obvious. Well, of course this has to happen. And, you know, some letter is going to come in the mail, or a tornado is going to whisk my protagonist to Oz, or, you know, something's going to happen. Oh, I've seen it done so many times. You know, how many times do we see a hero? Oh, they've got to go on a quest. You know, they've got to get on a journey, and Murray in A Wrinkle in Time has to go across the universe to rescue her dad. Like, how many stories have we read where something like that has to happen? Well, a lot of stories, because that's what stories are. It's the hero going on that adventure of change. You know, if it's a love story, it can't just be given at the beginning that love is easy. It's a journey toward love, finding the right love, learning how to love. One of my favorite books, Jane Eyre, is many things, but among the things that it is a great love story. If Jane and Mr. Rochester didn't have all these obstacles to their relationship, there would be no story. And so we have to resist, you know, the idea that if we do all the things that story needs us to do in order to tell good stories, if we like, well, why does they have to have a misunderstanding? Why does there have to be all these obstacles? You know, why can't they just sort it all out? Why do we have to do all these things? Well, that's what story is made of. That is the truthful depiction of change. You know, it's not that we're imitating stories just because we like to imitate stories. It's because we want to tell the truth to our reader. They know that you don't just go to the gym, do a light workout, and come home like with a six-pack. They know that. They know how hard change is. They know how many times you yourself will be your own worst enemy on the road to change, right? You're going to get in your own way. You're going to have doubts and fears. You're going to hear the voice in your head that, you know, made you think that maybe you weren't entitled to having whatever, you know, whatever it is at the end of this journey that you feel is where you want to be. So all that stuff is just it's just the truth. It's the truth. And the truth finds its way into stories. And that's why people love stories. They teach us about ourselves, you know. So in answer to my friend's question about why does it feel like all these, it's all been done before. It's because human nature is very constant and it's very universal, and we all go through these very similar journeys. We all, our needs are pretty basic. Uh, I'm sure you guys know there's this the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's usually like depicted as a pyramid that's got layers in it, like a layer cake. I don't have a picture of it here to share with you, but I'm sure you can find out. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And you'll see that at the base of it, these are the human needs. We need food, we need shelter, we need safety, like we need basic survival, And then as we go up, once those needs are met, we can start needing other things. We can start needing companionship, you know. Once that need is met, we can start needing other things. We could start needing social status. Once that need is met, then we can start needing, um, uh, kind of a more abstract sense of fulfillment, artistic fulfillment, spiritual fulfillment. And so you see that when people's basic needs aren't met, it's hard to get engaged with the higher needs, right? The higher needs on the pyramid. People's basic needs are all the same, you know? We want to survive. We want to feel safe. We want our loved ones to feel safe. We want to have a sense of belonging. Right? And so if stories depict something true about human nature, and human nature is, kind of gosh darn simple, right? At the end of the day, this is going to find its way in stories. Stories are about survival. Stories are about finding love and belonging. Stories are about growing up and leaving home. Stories are about returning to homes that you thought were lost, right? This is what stories are about at their most kind of DNA level. So your story is not going to be that different from any other story in the sense that it's going to tell the truth about what human beings care about. And it's going to tell the truth about how change happens, right? It's this incremental growth that is triggered by obstacles, by difficulties, by the need to respond to fresh challenges. That's how we grow. Your story is going to have those things, right? What's going to be unique is the personal invention, your personal spin that you put on it. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm going to write a love story. I'm going to write a story of a journey trying to get home. I'm going to write a story of growing up and leaving home and individuating and finding identity. I'm going to write a story of how to cope after divorce. I'm going to write a story about the desire to explore, unknown land, and go into space and really contemplate the human place in the universe. I'm going to write a story about these things. You write your story about those things. I guarantee you that so many people have written a story about that thing, and this is in quotes, that thing before, because they're just perennial human questions. And it's actually a good sign. If you are writing about one of those kinds of questions with those kinds of stakes, with that kind of grounding in the truth of human experience, you have got the makings of a great story. You want to double down on that. You want to lean into that. You don't want to say, oh no, too many other people have written stories about needing to survive and the need for belonging and the need for love and the desire for home. I got to find something different. Well, I don't know what it's going to be, because that's what it means to be human. And if your readers are human, and listen, my cats are right here in the room with me. You can't see them, but no offense, guys. But chances are that your readers are human, because we haven't taught the cats to read yet. They're working on it. That's why they're always sitting on the newspapers, right? That's why the cats sit on the magazines. They're trying to figure it out. They haven't done it yet. So right now, your readers are human, dealing with core human truths. It's no matter what form it takes, what genre it takes, what age reader you're writing for, you are going to be writing about those same things, and you're going to be using that same shape of story. So my hot take on originality: don't let it hold you back. This kind of false belief that what you create should not have any resemblance to what has gone before. That is actually, it's the opposite of what's true. What you're creating as a storyteller is like, we're passing the Olympic torch to each other. The stories that have been told throughout history, the stories that have been told, by your peers, we're all just kind of carrying forward the human project of storytelling in order for our readers to understand themselves better, to not feel alone, right? To feel seen, and so that they can understand each other better. Storytelling is no less than that, in my opinion. So if anybody's got any questions, I'm looking in the comment box now. I'm so delighted to see so many of you here. And I'm just going to take a quick look. Angelica, I'm going to post your comment if you don't mind. So Angelica writes, and originality isn't something that stresses me out. Excellent. But comparisons to other stories I've gotten from people who've read my work concern me. I feel like I have to limit what I take in. Oh, that's so interesting. Like, that is so interesting. So I'm too short. Oh, there we go. I'm too short. I have to put your comment down, Angelica, so I don't have to stretch my neck like an ostrich. So when you share your work with other people, right, that opens up a whole new layer of vulnerability. And what you have to remember is that there are not, the people that you love in your life want to support your writing, and they will want to make helpful comments. And unless they are extremely skilled and experts in the craft of writing and story structure, just take it as love, right? They're just loving you up. Don't listen to what they say. Just take it as love. That's my advice for a happy life as a writer, because your whole life, people are going to be telling you what they think of your books, right? It's like, that's just part of it. You can't lose sleep over that. Now, when you're presenting your work to the industry, so I'm not sure exactly which one you're referring to, when you're presenting your work to the industry or for people who are trying to offer an opinion, not just on what they see on the page, but what its marketplace potential might be. This question of, oh, it's too similar to such and such, or it's too similar to that, it does come up. But I can't speak on behalf of the publishing industry. I would not dare to. But the amount of books that get published that are excruciatingly similar to whatever the last big hit was is almost comical. Agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments. We have one book that comes out that's about, a kid goes to wizard school and has to defeat evil, and there'll be 20 of them within 2 years. That's just the marketplace. That's capitalism at work. That is a topic that is above my pay grade, no pun intended. When people compare your work in a negative way to something else that it's been done before, I would, and what I mean in a negative way, that they're offering you feedback like, oh, I read a book just like this, and they're sort of offering that to you as a caution, that they're showing off their sophistication about knowing what's in the marketplace, and they're trying to protect you from being hurt. And there's lots of motives that would have to do with that. I wouldn't worry about it. I just wouldn't worry about it. If you tell your dystopian YA story with full-on authenticity and from your heart and all that good stuff, it will have its readers. It will find its readers. We didn't just publish one dystopian YA book and say, okay, well, that's done. We don't need any more of those. Yes. And with all similar covers. Indeed. Well, that's marketing for you. That's marketing. The cover signals to the reader, this is a book. If you liked this book, if you like The Hunger Games, you'll love this book, right? We're going to go so far as to use a similar typeface and maybe the same colors on the cover. That's marketing. It's marketing. Listen, when you go into the supermarket and you get into the boxes of breakfast cereal, they all look like boxes of breakfast cereal. Why? Because they want you to know, are you looking for breakfast cereal? Got you. Here it is. It's right here. Here's the breakfast cereal. They don't make the boxes of breakfast cereal look like frozen food pizzas. They don't want to confuse you. They want you to get what you came to get. So again, capitalism. There's a lot, there's a lot that we need to have discernment about as writers, because we put ourselves out in public. We put our work out in public, right? Even if it's just to our critique group or to our beta readers or to our, our writing circle of friends. And it's vulnerable and they're going to say stuff. And so cultivating discernment is actually one of the great benefits of having some training in writing craft, because you know what's good and what's not good. And you can seek connection by letting people read your stuff, but they may not be able to tell you with accuracy anything that is of benefit to you. And as I say, just take it as love. It still feels good when people care enough about our work to take the time to read it. That is a huge gift. And I know you guys know what I'm talking about. It feels really good when someone takes the time to read it, But the minute they say, I had a few ideas, do you mind if I make some suggestions? Just don't freak out. Learning to take notes is an essential part of developing as a writer. Don't freak out, but just consider the source. And if the source is not like a super expert about writing craft or story structure, all you can ask of them is to say, did you stay engaged? Did it keep you interested? Was it hard to finish? Were there sections of it that you found yourself flipping the pages? That can kind of give you a little map to the trouble spots in the manuscript. If somebody says, yeah, to be honest with you, the middle really was a slog. So I kind of skimmed through but the ending was good. Like, that is sometimes a useful comment, right? Because it's just drawing a little circle about look at the middle. But if that person says the middle was kind of a slog, but I had a great idea. Like, wouldn't it be awesome if like an asteroid came and hit the earth, like right about they're going to give you whatever idea they want to give you. It's not coming from the same deep well of personal authenticity that your book came from. So the odds of it being the right solution are not that great. Not that great. So that's what I have to say. Yeah. To limit what you take in, it depends, if you have to know yourself. Angelica's question about, do you limit what you take in to avoid feeling overly influenced? If you're very impressionable, like I am, like full disclosure, I am totally that person that if you put me in a room with people who have like Irish accents or something like that, I will in a minute have a brogue. Like, I've never been to Ireland in my life. I'm just very impressionable. I just like fall into it. I'm not trying to like be fancy. It just happens. Like, it's kind of like I just start humming along in my head. If you are like that, then what you don't want to end up doing is spending all your time reading some book that has a really strong voice, and then you're going to go back to your book, which has got nothing to do with that book that you just read. And you're going to start writing it in imitation of that voice. That can happen. It's easy to fix it afterwards. You can always revise that stuff out. Just know if you're vulnerable to that. I would say that can be a concern. Yeah. All right. We've got one person. Terry thinks that the cats are actually already reading. So the question of how we might change the laws of story structure to entertain our potential cat readers is a very, very deep and profound question, and one that we can perhaps address in a future live. I love that. It really makes me laugh. Anybody else have any questions? We've been on for over half an hour, and I know everybody's like, got stuff to do, because we're all at home looking for stuff to do. So I'm thrilled to do this with you right now. And we'll do this every Wednesday by the week. I'm going to make this a little habit. So hopefully we'll start, you can email me questions. I want to start addressing the things you guys want me to talk about as well. I love this question of originality, though, because it's sort of foundational. And I hope this discussion was a benefit for you. I'm just going to scroll through the comments and see if we got any more questions coming in. I love you guys watching from YouTube and Facebook. Technology for the win. Isn't that cool? All right. Well, that's all I got for you today. This is being recorded. So if you want to watch it again, or you want to say, hey, I have a friend who might want to check this out, you can direct them to it. And I got one more quick question that came in. And I know. So someone on Facebook, I don't know who it is, wants to know, and it's really the funniest typo ever. What do you think of starting by self-punishing? Oops, publishing. I'm not making fun. I just think it's hilarious because what do I think of starting by self-publishing? Um, that is a really great question. Why don't we can do we'll do a whole talk about publishing, the journey to publishing. I'm really glad you asked that. Let me give you a quick answer since you were kind enough to ask it now. I think that we are in a very transitional moment in the world of publishing, simply because the technology has made it so easy for people to self-publish, right? When you look at that change between monks having to copy books by hand to Gutenberg, the printing press, like what a concept. All of a sudden we can make lots of books, to the rise of this idea that we can write a book and publish it digitally. And not only is it published, but it's globally distributed. It's literally distributed around the world. It is remarkable. Nobody in the industry, in in the traditional publishing industry, can tell you with perfect foreknowledge what this is going to mean for the way publishing works. But we can look at some other examples. We can look at the music industry, or we can look at the film industry, both of which have robust, independent sectors, right? We'll look at like Hollywood, right? You've got these huge movies that are made by Hollywood studios, and then you've got little indie films that premiere at Sundance, right, at the film festivals, that people shoot on their phones and cobble together money. There's a very robust tradition in recent years. As soon as the technology changed to make it possible for people to make their own movies, they made them, right? So and now that indie film world lives happily side by side, right, with Hollywood, and people go back and forth, and you'll see even really, major artists, big name directors will be like, yeah, you'll do a picture for the studio, you get all the money, right? And then you take some of that money and you shoot your own indie picture that you love, like the story of your heart. So we see this happening. It would not surprise me if that is really where publishing is going to end up. Here's the difference. And I think this is what your question needs, like it needs to be addressed. At this moment of time, indie publishing is thriving for certain kinds of books, genre fiction, mysteries, romances, where the reader and the author have such a relationship and there's such a clear understanding of what kind of book you're going to get, that the capacity to market those independently published books efficiently is easy. We all know what the brand is. Where it gets tricky is if you are not writing in one of those kind of easy to describe genres where there's a lot of repeat business, if you will, right? Where there's a lot of series, where the author is creating a lot of content that is kind of like similar and that her readers know they're going to like. If you're creating one-off books that are harder to pigeonhole, marketing those books without without the imprimatur of a big publishing house is just much trickier. It's not impossible. It's much trickier. So the answer is different depending on what kind of book you have in mind and for what kind of reader. My main concern about self-publishing is that people choose to self-publish because they don't take the time to figure out what their options are in terms of submitting to the traditional publishing industry. They think it's much harder than it really is. They've been scared off of it, like, oh, it's impossible to get an agent, it's impossible to get published. It's not impossible. People do it every day. There's a lot of books coming out, all the time. And so I always want to interrogate that question that you've asked a little more deeply, and we'll do this in another Wednesday, all right? Because I think it's something that people are super interested in. I always want to ask a little more deeply, like, well, in your heart of hearts, would your dream be to get published by a big publisher? Like, do you want to be published by Penguin Random House? Do you want to be published by HarperCollins? Do you want to have a literary agent? If you want those things, let's talk about getting you closer to those things. Indie publishing is not, it's not bad. It's just not the thing that you actually secretly want. So I just want to make sure you haven't like turned off what you really want because you think it's not available to you. So that's something I would want to interrogate. And all of the usual caveats about indie publishing having to do with quality, having to do with not, there's nobody to tell you your book's not ready to be published. And so because you're not going through the traditional gatekeepers. And I want to say this with a lot of love and respect for all of the writers that I have worked with in my career teaching, which has gone on for many, many years and is ongoing, right? You guys know that I teach through Path of the Storyteller. There's training in story structure. There's training in writing craft. So I have a lot of experience with students who are really serious, who've written books, who've actually queried agents, who are really trying to get some traction, and they're not getting it. And so what they say is, well, I'll indie publish. I can't get the publishing industry to pay attention to me. And I'm like, let me see your manuscript. And I read it, and they're not ready to be published yet. And this is the tough love of a mentor. They haven't told a great story yet. Their writing craft is not ready yet. They need to work on being better before they publish. And people get very like, I'm not sure I want to hear that, because what happens is that if I say, this could also be better, that could also be part of the problem, then it's like, what do? I can't drop everything and go get an MFA. I can't spend $1 billion to go, like, how do I make my work better? And then it just kind of like, you don't know how to do it. And so you just say, well, let me just indie publish. It's good enough. There's all kinds of mental constructs that we can go through. So it's a big topic. As you can see, you got me started. I said I wasn't going to talk about it, but you made me. So that's let me stop there for today, because it's definitely a lot. And I would like to maybe go into detail about some of the options and things. I have one more question here for books. It's so nice to see you here watching on YouTube. I'm going to share this one. You are welcome, Facebook user. You are welcome. Here for books, this is a great question. How do you take an average storyline and make it your own? Well, I don't know if you came in at the top of this live stream here for books. Love your handle, by the way. I'm here for books too. Like literally, it's all about the books. But what we mean by an average storyline is something I've been talking about. This question of all of the things that stories have in common. It does not necessarily make them average. It makes them stories. They bear the right resemblance to a story. But I love what you say here about making it your own, because that is exactly the job. That is exactly what we must do. If it's a love story, if it's a Western, if it's a mystery, if it's a thriller, if it's a dystopia, if it's middle grade fantasy, if it's contemporary realism about some issues that we really want to write about, we are making it our own by virtue of the fact that we're writing it. We have to make it our own. That is our job, is that we have to kind of open the doors right here, kind of open the heart doors. And I'm going to wave bye to Louise. Wheezy, it's great to see you. Let's talk. I'd love to hear what's going on with you. I love that you stopped by. Thanks so much. To make something your own involves self-exposure. It involves self-knowledge, and you will find with experience, if you start to operate in your writing life from the place that everything I write is inflected with me. Where am I of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? What drives me? What are my patterns? What are my childhood wounds? What are the things that I find myself writing about over and over again? What are the kinds of, difficulties that haunt my dreams? We all have a thing, we all have the same, this is true. We have the same issues that circle back and back and back and back in our lives. And that of necessity, and this is a good thing, is going to lend a kind of a shape to our writing lives as well. We're artists. We're going to create the stuff that only